What if the reason your life feels like it's quietly collapsing isn't because something is wrong, but because something ancient inside you is waking up? Have you ever felt that strange moment when the world you once trusted suddenly feels thin, almost unreal? When the roles you play, the goals you chase, even the person you call me, begin to feel like costumes worn for too long? That moment isn't madness. It isn't weakness. It's the first tremor of something far more dangerous and far more sacred. Most people believe spiritual awakening is light, peace, bliss, a gentle opening into truth. But what if the real awakening begins as a fracture? What if consciousness doesn't arrive to save you, but to dismantle you? There comes a point, quiet, unannounced, when the life you built stops answering your soul, not because it failed, but because it succeeded at something else, keeping you asleep. And when that sleep breaks, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like loss, confusion, a deep, wordless grief for something you can't even name. This is why so many turn back, because awakening doesn't ask you to believe something new. It asks you to lose something old, your certainty, your identity, the story that kept you safe. As Carl Jung warned, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And that pain isn't symbolic, it's personal. It reaches into the places where your ego learned how to survive and asks a terrifying question. Who are you without the mask? If this resonates, if something in you is stirring, tightening, recognizing itself, then you're not watching this by accident. And if you feel that pull, that quiet yes beneath the fear, consider subscribing now. Not for answers, but for companionship through questions most people never dare to face. Because what's coming isn't inspiration, it's initiation. In the next breath of this journey, we descend into the reason awakening feels like exile, and why the mind fights so hard to return to the dream it once called home. It usually doesn't begin with visions or voices. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, woven into ordinary days. A dream that feels too real, lingering long after you wake. Not chaotic, not random, but charged. You can't explain why it stays with you, only that it does. A sudden pressure in your chest for no medical reason. Moments of dizziness when nothing around you has changed. An ache of sadness that arrives without a story. Or a deep sense that something is about to happen, even though nothing is wrong. You try to dismiss it. You tell yourself you're tired, stressed, overthinking. But the signs return, again and again. You start noticing patterns, numbers repeating, songs playing at the exact moment you're thinking of someone, random memories surfacing from childhood with no logical trigger. You walk into familiar places and feel like a stranger. Conversations feel hollow. Laughter feels delayed, like it's arriving from another lifetime. And the most unsettling part isn't the strangeness, it's the recognition. Something in you knows this isn't coincidence. This is how awakening actually announces itself. Not through fireworks, but through disruption. Through cracks in the ordinary where something ancient begins to leak through. The body feels it first because the body never learned how to lie. Tight shoulders, shallow breath, sudden exhaustion after moments of clarity. The nervous system starts recalibrating before the mind understands why. You may even feel like you're losing motivation for things that once defined you. Careers you worked years to build suddenly feel heavy. Relationships that once felt safe now feel distant, even when nothing has changed on the surface. You're not unhappy, but you're not at home either. And that in-between state is terrifying. People around you may not notice. Or worse, they notice and misunderstand. They say you're becoming distant, moody, hard to reach. You try to explain, but language fails. How do you describe a feeling that doesn't belong to the old world anymore, but hasn't yet formed into the new? This is where many begin to doubt themselves. They wonder if something is broken, if they're becoming depressed, if they're imagining things. But what if what you're experiencing is not malfunction, but communication? According to depth psychology, especially the work of Carl Jung, the psyche speaks in symbols long before it speaks in clarity. When consciousness begins to expand beyond the persona, the socially acceptable self, the unconscious pushes back, not to punish you, but to be heard. Dreams intensify because the soul has no other channel. Physical sensations arise because the mind resists listening. Emotional waves surge because suppressed truths are rising. This is not spiritual fantasy, it's initiation. And here's the part no one prepares you for. These signs don't appear to guide you forward into something new. They appear to pull you downward, into questions you've avoided, wounds you've outgrown pretending didn't matter, and truths that can no longer stay buried. If this feels familiar, you're not alone, and you're not late. You're right on time. If you feel called to continue this journey and explore what these signs are really pointing to, consider subscribing, not for certainty, but for clarity earned the hard way. Because the real mystery isn't why these signals are happening. The real question is this: what part of you is trying to emerge? And what part of you knows it cannot survive unchanged if you listen? There is a first sign that almost no one warns you about, not because it is rare, but because it is terrifying to name. The first true sign of spiritual awakening is not heightened intuition, not synchronicities, not even expanded awareness. It is the slow, unsettling collapse of the identity you once depended on to survive. This is the moment when the roles you played effortlessly, worker, partner, achiever, caretaker, dreamer, begin to feel strangely artificial. You still perform them. You still succeed. People still recognize you. But inside, something has shifted. The inner yes that once fueled your motivation has gone quiet. You wake up one morning and realize, I don't know who I am anymore. This isn't confusion, it's erosion. Ancient traditions called this the sacred dismemberment. Mystics spoke of it as the dark night. Shamans understood it as soul descent. And in modern depth psychology, Carl Jung named it with ruthless clarity: the death of the persona. The persona is not fake, it is necessary. It is the mask you built to belong, to be loved, to be safe in a world that rewards conformity and punishes depth. But every mask has an expiration date. An awakening begins the moment that mask can no longer hold the weight of your becoming. This is why everything feels unstable. You lose interest in conversations that once entertained you. You feel repelled by goals you once chased with hunger. You sense a growing distance between who you appear to be and who you feel yourself becoming. And here is the hidden truth. This collapse is not a mistake. It is an intelligence at work. The psyche does not dismantle itself randomly. It dismantles structures that can no longer contain the soul. When your inner world expands beyond the identity you constructed, the old self must fracture, not because it was wrong, but because it has fulfilled its purpose. This is why the experience feels like grief. You are mourning a version of yourself that kept you alive. You are losing certainty without gaining clarity. You are standing in a space where the old no longer fits and the new has not yet formed. And the mind panics. It tells you something is wrong. It diagnoses, labels, tries to fix. It urges you to rebuild the old structure as fast as possible. But this is the trap. Because if you rush to rebuild, you rebuild the same cage. Awakening does not give you a better identity. It takes identity away until essence can speak. And essence does not shout. It whispers through discomfort, through emptiness, through the unbearable feeling of not knowing who you are without performance. This is why so many people never survive their awakening. Not because they are weak, but because they mistake ego death for personal failure. They numb it, distract from it, pathologize it, or spiritualize it into something harmless. But this phase is anything but harmless. It is initiation by unknowing. The ancient schools understood this and protected it. Not everyone was allowed inside, not because knowledge was elitist, but because premature understanding could shatter a mind that was still clinging to certainty. And if this resonates, if you feel seen in this unraveling, take a moment to honor it. To acknowledge that what you're experiencing has a lineage, a map, a meaning. If this kind of depth speaks to you, gently show your support by liking this video and subscribing. Not as a habit, but as a quiet signal that you recognize this space as a circle, one where these truths are spoken without dilution. Because now that the mask is cracking, something else is preparing to surface. And the next sign is even more unsettling, because it doesn't just dissolve who you thought you were. It forces you to meet the parts of yourself you spent a lifetime avoiding. I want to tell you a story, not as a teacher above you, but as someone who walked into this fire believing I was prepared, and learned very quickly that I wasn't. It began during a season of apparent success. On the outside, life looked stable, productive, functional. I was doing what I was supposed to do, meeting expectations, saying the right things, smiling at the right moments, and yet, every night when the noise died down, there was a quiet pressure in my chest, like something knocking from the inside, asking to be let out. At first I ignored it. Then came the dreams. Not symbolic in the gentle way people describe online, but visceral, heavy. I would wake up with my heart racing, my body soaked in sweat, carrying images that refused to dissolve with daylight. Old memories resurfaced, ones I hadn't thought about in years. Faces, voices, moments of shame and grief I thought I had already healed. During the day, my body started speaking too, a tight throat when I tried to say yes to things that no longer felt true. A sudden exhaustion after conversations that required pretending, a hollow feeling after achievements that once would have filled me with pride. The strangest part was this. Nothing was wrong, but nothing was right anymore either. I remember sitting in my car one afternoon, hands on the steering wheel, unable to turn the key. Not because I didn't know where I was going, but because I no longer recognized who was supposed to arrive there. I felt suspended between versions of myself, the old one still functioning, the new one not yet formed. That's when the fear set in. Not dramatic fear, quiet fear, the kind that whispers, "You're losing yourself," the kind that wonders if you've gone too far, the kind that makes you crave the comfort of who you used to be, even if that version was slowly suffocating. I tried to fix it. Of course I did. I read. I meditated harder. I searched for meaning. I tried to rise above the discomfort. But the more I tried to transcend it, the heavier everything became, because this wasn't a phase meant to be escaped. It was a descent meant to be honored. One night, after resisting for weeks, I finally stopped running. I sat alone, lights off, no music, no distractions, and for the first time, I let myself feel everything I had been managing away. The grief, the anger, the disappointment, the loneliness. Not toward the world, but toward myself. Toward all the moments I abandoned my truth just to belong. And something unexpected happened. The pain softened. Not because it disappeared, but because it felt seen. I realized that what I had been calling confusion was actually a reunion. The parts of me I buried to survive were returning, not to destroy me, but to be acknowledged. That was the night I understood something that changed everything. Awakening doesn't begin with light. It begins with honesty. Since then, life hasn't become easier in the way the ego hopes for, but it has become truer, quieter, more aligned. I stopped chasing certainty and started listening for resonance. I stopped asking, how do I go back? And began asking, what is this trying to teach me? And I know this story isn't just mine. If any part of this mirrors your own experience, the dreams, the physical sensations, the loss of motivation, the sense of standing between selves, I want you to know you're not alone in it. This path can feel isolating, but it doesn't have to be walked in silence. If this space resonates, consider subscribing, not as a transaction, but as a signal that you want to be part of a community where these experiences are spoken aloud without judgment. And I want to hear from you. In the comments, share one moment, just one, when you knew something inside you was changing. A dream, a sign, a feeling you couldn't explain. I read them, and some of them will be carried forward into future conversations here. Because the most difficult part isn't the descent itself. It's what happens when, in the darkness, you realize the next thing waiting for you isn't comfort, but a confrontation with a part of yourself you've never dared to face. There is a second sign of awakening that feels even more unsettling than the collapse of identity. Because this one doesn't dissolve who you think you are. It reveals who you have been avoiding. This sign appears when the shadow begins to rise. Not metaphorically, practically, daily, personally. You start reacting in ways that surprise you. Small things trigger disproportionate emotions. A comment lingers longer than it should. A look feels like rejection. A boundary feels like abandonment. You may notice patterns repeating, conflicts, disappointments, self-sabotage, no matter how much inner work you've already done. And the most confusing part is this. You thought you were past this, more conscious, more evolved, more aware. But awakening does not bypass the shadow. It summons it. The shadow is not evil. It is unfinished life. It is every emotion you learned was unsafe to express. Every desire you were told was too much. Every instinct you buried to stay loved. According to Carl Jung, the shadow contains everything the conscious self refuses to acknowledge. And until it is made conscious, it will direct your life from the dark. Awakening accelerates this process. It turns the volume up. This is why things feel intensified. You're not becoming worse. You're becoming honest. The sign that the shadow is activating is not darkness, it's friction. Life starts pressing on your most sensitive places. Not to punish you, but to reveal where your energy is still split, where you are still performing instead of embodying, where parts of you are still locked outside the circle of self-acceptance. And here's the secret most people never hear. The shadow does not want to be destroyed. It wants to be met. So instead of asking, why am I reacting like this? The real question becomes, what part of me is asking to be seen? This is where the practical key comes in. A simple technique, ancient, uncomfortable, and profoundly effective. When you feel triggered, don't analyze it away. Don't spiritualize it. Don't fix it. Pause. Breathe. And ask inwardly, what am I protecting right now? Then listen, not for words, but for sensation. Where do you feel it in the body? Is it tight, heavy, hot, numb? Does it feel young, defensive, tired? Stay with the sensation for 60 seconds. No story, no judgment, just presence. This does something radical. It interrupts the old survival loop and teaches the nervous system that it is safe to feel without performing. Over time, the shadow begins to soften, not because it's conquered, but because it's no longer exiled. This is how integration begins. And this is why awakening feels exhausting. You are no longer dissociating from your inner world. You are inhabiting it. Fully, honestly, humanly. Anyone can do this. You don't need special knowledge, only courage, only willingness, only the decision to stop running from yourself. If this resonates, if you feel this language describing something already happening inside you, take a moment to subscribe. This space exists for those who are walking this path consciously, without shortcuts, without denial. Because there is a third sign, a deeper one that almost no one recognizes until it's too late. It doesn't arrive as pain. It arrives as silence. And when it does, everything you thought awakening was about is challenged at its core. There is one sign of awakening that almost no one talks about. It doesn't come with chaos. It doesn't arrive with breakdown. It doesn't even feel dramatic. It comes as silence. After the collapse of identity, after the confrontation with the shadow, after the emotional storms and existential earthquakes, there is a stillness. And that stillness can feel more terrifying than the pain ever did. Because when the noise stops, when the ego exhausts itself, when the mind runs out of arguments, when the emotional waves lose their violence, you are left face to face with something vast. An inner space with no script, no performance, no narrative to cling to, just awareness. This is the deepest sign of awakening. The moment you realize that beneath all the layers, persona, shadow, ambition, trauma, there is something in you that has never been damaged. Ancient Christian mystics called it the kingdom within. Hermetic traditions spoke of it as the divine spark. Even modern interpretations of quantum consciousness hint at it, a field of awareness that exists prior to thought, prior to identity, and when you touch it, even briefly, something irreversible happens. You stop searching, not because you found answers, but because you found presence. This silence is not emptiness. It is fullness without noise. It is the awareness watching your thoughts without being them. It is the space in which your fear rises and falls without defining you. And here is the revelation that changes everything. You are never the mask. You are never the wound. You are never even the healing. You are the awareness in which all of it unfolds. This is why so many people don't survive their awakening, not because the truth is violent, but because it dissolves the drama they unconsciously depended on. The ego feeds on movement, on conflict, on becoming. But this silence asks you to be, not improve, not transcend, not fix, just be. And for a mind trained to survive through striving, that feels like death. In this space, you begin to see something radical. Your worth was never earned. Your existence was never conditional. The self you were trying so hard to build was already resting on something indestructible. If this message resonates, if you feel that quiet recognition inside, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. This content is created with devotion, not for profit, and every subscription strengthens a community of people who are choosing consciousness over comfort. Your presence here matters more than you know, because when you rest in this silence long enough, something extraordinary begins to unfold. You start moving through life differently, not detached, not numb, but anchored. Situations that once destabilized you now pass through like weather. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't shatter you. You feel deeply, but you are not drowned by feeling. This is what ancient teachings meant by rebirth. Not becoming someone new, remembering what cannot be destroyed. And yet, here is the paradox. This silence is not the end. It is not a final arrival. It is a doorway. Because once you recognize the awareness within you, a new question emerges. A question so simple it feels almost childlike. If I am not the mask, if I am not the wound, if I am not even the story, then who or what has been living my life all along? If you have walked through everything described here, the collapse of identity, the rising shadow, the sacred silence, then understand this. None of it happened to break you. It happened to wake you. Every dream that unsettled you, every relationship that shifted, every night you questioned your sanity, every moment you felt exiled from the life you once called normal. They were not random disruptions. They were invitations. Invitations to move from surface to depth, from performance to presence, from survival to truth. Spiritual awakening is not a spiritual upgrade. It is a return, a stripping away, a remembering. And the signs you experienced, the confusion, the friction, the silence, were never punishments. They were signals that your consciousness was expanding beyond the cage it once accepted as home. Most people turn back because the process feels like loss. But those who stay long enough begin to see the pattern. You didn't lose your identity. You outgrew it. You didn't lose people. You shifted frequency. You didn't lose certainty. You discovered awareness. And awareness is not loud. It does not demand recognition. It simply observes, breathes, and remains. It is the quiet strength that allows you to walk through chaos without becoming it. This is the deeper mission of awakening. Not to escape the world, not to become spiritually superior, not to preach, but to embody, to become a living reminder that it is possible to be conscious in a world addicted to distraction, to be present in a culture obsessed with performance, to be whole in a system built on fragmentation. When you survive your awakening, you do not emerge perfect. You emerge real. You stop trying to impress. You stop shrinking to belong. You stop abandoning yourself to avoid discomfort. You become someone who can sit with pain, your own and others, without flinching. Someone who no longer needs constant validation because you have met yourself in the fire and returned. And that changes everything, because when even one person chooses awareness over autopilot, something shifts in the collective, quietly, invisibly, but powerfully. Your awakening is not isolated. It is connected to something larger than your personal story. Throughout history, those who chose to remain conscious in times of confusion became anchors for others, not by force, not by persuasion, but by presence. And now you understand something most never realize. The awakening was never about destroying you. It was about revealing you, the version of you that does not collapse when illusions fall, the version of you that does not disappear when approval fades, the version of you that can stand in truth without aggression and in silence without fear. That is the one who survives. And if you are still here, listening, feeling, recognizing, then you are not someone who turned back. You are someone who stayed. So let this be your quiet declaration. You stayed when it hurt. You stayed when it was lonely. You stayed when it was easier to numb out. And because you stayed, you are becoming unshakable, not rigid, but rooted. If this journey resonated with you, I invite you to take one simple step. In the comments, write your name and the city you're watching from. I will personally read them, and in the next video, I'll send special greetings to some of you. Let this become more than a video. Let it become a living circle of awakened minds across the world. If this message touched you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Not out of obligation, but because this channel exists for those who are ready to walk this path consciously. Every subscription strengthens this space and helps these teachings reach those who feel alone in their awakening. And as you move forward, remember this: awakening is not a single event. It is a rhythm, a remembering, a returning. You are not here to chase enlightenment. You are here to embody truth. And once you have touched the fire and chosen not to run, you never walk the world the same way again. The real question is no longer whether you will survive your awakening. It is this: now that you have remembered who you are, what will you dare to become?